Alright, welcome back to Divinity Original Sin 2. Honor Mode Plus run with way more enemies and way less experience. I was tired yesterday, so I couldn't do the aftermath analysis, but I felt it is worthwhile since we're now approaching the end of Act 1. That we just take a look at where we stand, like what went well, what hasn't gone so well, and also do a mandatory like ritual. Let's start with a mandatory ritual. Most of you might not like it as much, and or it feels a little bit out of context, but we need to kill each and every one. We're going to leave the island, and most of the NPCs, specifically the merchants, will not be useful anymore in the future. Moreover, we unfortunately have way too less experience. In the last combat, we were fighting over-leveled enemies, and whilst we gain an XP bonus for that, being at least level 8 would be helpful for Act 2. So we're kind of, with the mods that we have installed, forced to go down that route. I will use the time whilst we are mercilessly slaughtering everyone in our way to talk about what went well and what hasn't. So, as for the current party setup and how we started with everything, let's, before we go into the analysis, because I can do that during the fighting, that's not going to be difficult. Let's double check that we have indeed closed everything. So we do have the cursed ring. I think we can close that journal entrance by just putting it on, then finding out it's cursed. Oh, surprise, surprise. And putting it off again. But we will need a source point for that, so we are actually doing it right here. We will close as many of the quests as possible, and yeah, then afterwards kill everyone, because there is no more XP to be gained other than killing these guys. So we do have the ring. The ring, indeed, like I said, was cursed. There's the Band of Bacchus. When we put it on, we get the cursed status, a lot of negative effects. And in order to get rid of it, the bloody ring needs to get loose. That's what we just did. But the ring itself will not lose its cursed status. So no matter how hard you try, you effectively cannot uncurse, so to speak, the ring. It will still set the cursed status, which means, unfortunately, we cannot use it. And you can see it's now gone. Like the cursed ring is no longer a thing. The escape, quest will finish when we leave Act 1. This here is an Act 2 quest. This here is also an Act 2 quest, and Call to Arms. It means it's basically the same as the escape quest. It's just the preview of it. The tribe of Sahelia was the one quest with the elves that we would want to do. It's, by the way, a couple of the NPCs that we are going to let live. Sahelia's crest here is something that we need in Act 2 when we're going to find the elves. Now, with the ring gone, let's begin our slaughter, because I was thinking about whether or not we have missed something, but I think we really did all of the quests. I looked online, found no indication of us missing anything else. Yeah, and now it is basically time to start our rampage. And I will use the time for a little bit of a reflection of what went well and what hasn't. So what I liked a lot about the game so far, and all of the things it had to offer, was we were effectively with the mod, we had a decent challenge. There were a couple of the fights even that I found a little bit too intense almost, but not like from a difficulty perspective, that they have a mechanic which is necessarily hard to understand. They were rather intense from the fact that there's a sheer enormous amount of enemies with an almost unlimited amount of hit points coming at us, and we're trying our best to just fence them off, which I think is fine generally. But to the degree that the author of this mod has done it, yeah, it was a little bit over the top. So that didn't imply necessarily a strategical depth. In some cases, you couldn't do something, and it required you to know the encounters up front. One encounter specifically, the one with the necromancer, was one that I found, yeah, I mean, it was challenging, but to a degree where I needed to put in furniture in order to even be able to withstand the amount of attacks that are incoming. And I think when you enter that realm, um, that's no longer a strategy game. It begins to be you cheesing on the game. So that's kind of my first negative concern. Concern number two about the run so far is we take a lot of time in the fights. Like the fights take just a very, very long time. I think this playthrough already is about 20, maybe 25 hours. And we are barely through Act 1. Like Act 2 is enormous and has a lot of really, really large fights. And for me, it feels a little bit like the engine that we're playing on, and the way that this here interacts is less streamlined than the XCOM engine. So in consequence, many turns take just a little bit longer, which means that you are constantly waiting and waiting and waiting, not only for animations, but yeah, it's also a lot of spells just take pretty long time. You need to wait for interactions to happen, and yeah, the enemies generally walk pretty slow. So if I could speed it up a little bit more, I would probably do that. So in hindsight, I should have probably installed another mod that would have helped us there. Are we needing anything from here? Probably not. We have enough skill books, but we need XP. So that's kind of criticism point number two. It is a little bit too long. Criticism point number three, it's a minor one. I probably would have wanted to try out a different build. I was forced through the difficulty of the challenge that we set to massively abuse long-ranged fighting styles. For instance, I wanted to go into a two-handed sword build. If you ever play that game on a normal difficulty, you will find out, yeah, I mean, two-handed builds are absolutely fine. There's like really definitely nothing wrong with them. You can play them from the get-go. If you play on, wait a second. And she just gave us an information. Good, thank you. And sorry, Margot. Oh, wow. She evaded. Okay, so number three, I wish I would have had a little bit broader option of fighting of skill trees. The skills that we were selecting were mainly putting more people onto the field, and we're trying to be as defensive as possible, yet retaining enough range DPS. So I do understand that that's probably not catering to everyone's preference. I fully understand that. But there's also only so much you can do. If there are like 20 enemies, you will run into a problem. So now to the positive sides, because I talked a lot about all of the negatives, but I think overall it was like very, very positive. I highly enjoyed the replayability of all of that. I could have gone through various different ways of solving things, specifically like answering quests in a different way. That will be relevant for Act 2. There you have to make a couple of decisions that might change in between the playthroughs. I really like that fact, and I think that's one of the great options that Divinity Original Sins 2 is offering you, the replayability. So I'm enjoying myself. I also enjoy the way that the game is structured. The strategic combat is just so much fun. I had a blast when we were planning all of that. By the way, we will let the elves here live, so these guys are needed for Act 2. Yeah, so really, really, really big props for the game and the way that the fights are playing out. Such a good experience. Yeah, so that's the positive part. I also liked how the party setup itself worked out. Our tank that isn't just purely a tank, but rather is focusing on summonings, is I'm just having a great time with him and with the incarnates. The incarnates are like super strong. I like the way. Wow, he's giving it his all. I like the way the incarnates are playing out. Lots and lots and lots of flexibility. I like the two-handed build of Syken, although it took really a while to get online, and it also requires a lot of like equipment to be effective in combat. So that one was or is good as well. The support mage, I knew that the build was fine from the beginning because I've played that in the first playthrough as well. So I already knew that it was a good selection. Yeah, and other than that, the fights themselves were different than I would have expected them. A couple of the fights were way easier than I would have expected it. For instance, the fight in the arena was like a piece of cake, and I was thinking or assuming that we would fight against 7 or 8 enemies at the same time. Other fights, on the other hand, were quite difficult, surprisingly difficult. For instance, I'm thinking about the labyrinth and the burning librarian within the labyrinth. That was an extremely difficult fight, mostly, in my opinion, through a wrong modding. So some of the monsters are way off. But I take it as an interesting curveball almost. If the game hands me another challenge, so I didn't mind that at all. One of the things that I could have probably done way better is the whole stealing part, like creating a smoke cloud and just using the smoke cloud in our advantage. Would have probably been the wiser choice in hindsight, because we needed to teleport away often, and yeah, it simply wasn't an optimal setup. Plus, it probably wasn't like a great guide of how to steal. I never liked the aspect about massive stealing in this game, but it's kind of the quote-unquote meta of Divinity Original Sins 2. You either steal or you're going to be very, very poor. So it's a sad thing. I don't know why exactly they did it. Probably because crafting in the first game was so overpowered that they wanted to do something different and take the merchants as the main source of items. They somehow did not balance the economy quite well. The idea of stealing once per merchant per playthrough is great. I really like it, but they haven't gone far enough with it. So instead of limiting the ability to steal way further, they basically allowed you to steal hundreds and hundreds of gold. That has also to do with the way that Divinity Original Sin 2 scales, or how scaling works. It's an exponential scaling, which de facto means that if you have high enough of a rank, you can completely rob the whole merchant without the merchant having any chance to like counteract or counterplay. And when you have the ability to just like steal 30,000 gold pieces, then it gets ridiculous. So it's not unheard of that in later playthroughs you will encounter a lot of people that are having like 5, 6, 700,000 gold pieces. Might sound like a crazy amount of gold, but in reality, it's just the whole vendors being looted. So I think from a game designing perspective, that could have been done way better. Specifically, if you think about the game making it mandatory almost to steal. So probably for another playthrough, if I ever go for one more, I would do a no stealing one. I did it at the beginning quite of my first playthrough. I never knew that stealing was such a big thing until I realized how much money you can make out of stealing, like ludicrous amounts of money. And yeah, everything else became less interesting then, because from a game standpoint that was like the optimal way to go. Likewise, a couple of the other things that I noticed, I wanted to do a little bit more of crafting here. Some of the crafting worked, specifically the one for arrows and consumables, in combat consumables like grenades. That one worked well. I wish there would have been just a little bit more variety. Like the material, the way of finding materials is extremely difficult here. They are super sparse outside of the city. Probably another follow-up of the designer team not wanting to do to be crafting, to let crafting be the main, so to speak, source of oh wow, we're overburdened. Not wanting crafting to be the main source of items. So with that, it almost feels like you're set in the ways of how to build the character. I was trying to avoid that at the beginning of the game by not going for a full melee or physical damage kind of group. That's the easiest way of creating a really good team, just to focus fully on physical damage and ignore the magical aspects other than supporting elements, or fully focus on the magical aspect and ignore the physical ones. But both ways work. So I didn't want to do that. I did a mixed team, which worked out fine, with the summoning skill being effectively best of both worlds. Also worked fine. But here's the criticism again. Like, the whole armor system seems to be great from a core idea, but it doesn't play out super well. I feel, specifically here in Act 1, as soon as the armor is gone, you're in a situation where it's where the enemy is almost has almost lost the battle. So once you're getting crowd controlled and you continue to get crowd controlled, it just gets so difficult to get out of the circle. So I don't know how to fix it really, other than probably almost putting in diminishing returns like cooldowns for certain crowd controlling abilities, so that once you're frozen, you cannot be frozen for an X amount of turns. Or once you're crowd controlled, you cannot be chain crowd controlled. Like that would probably help a little bit. Not sure if it would solve the whole problem though. So that was kind of the whole train of thought around combat. The train of thought around builds, to continue that for a second. I wanted to try a standard build, like with 4 characters and not the optimized Lonewolf 2-character build. I think that worked out reasonably well. I was pretty happy with how the combats went, and I'm still pretty happy with them. So that's really that really worked well. We're going to the bridge. There we go. Oh, really? Beast, you're overburdened. Well, we can put all of the stuff into our ship. Time for the traitor here to die. Okay, wait a second. He's level 8, which means we might want to take that a little bit more serious. Good. Trying to get his physical armor off, and then we would continue to crowd control him and basically win. So maybe I was overestimating the level 8. As for the questing, that worked out well, I think. I could have done it a little bit more planned in advance to not let it look random. I planned a lot of the things, but quite frankly, I did not plan the questing route all too much. And I received the feedback that the thinking process around what to do next and why to do it next was valuable as well. So I figured that might not have been the worst decision to do it that way. Just something that like I could streamline a little bit more. As for the videos of the Act 1, it felt most of them were good. A couple of them, when I was tired, were probably just like playing the combats and yeah, basically talking over them. The combats themselves. The only problem in this game, by the way, is the combats themselves seem to be a lot more predetermined than you would see it in an XCOM. There's like not an element of surprise where all of a sudden, yeah, reinforcements appear and you're like, oh shit, I need to deal with that. So once the combat has reached its climax, where both of the factions have used their main cooldowns, and you can almost see in which direction it swings. It's very seldom that you're going to see a change within the combat. You almost can predetermine who's going to win. Good. I think we have killed most, if not every, living being here. Wow, really? Dude, you're a level 6 character. Don't run away like that. There you go. And there you go. Another 500 XP. Well, I think we really killed every single NPC here. And we're still short of XP, for fuck's sake. Let's think. Well, up here is the only camp where we haven't killed someone yet, but all of them are level 1, so probably not worth the time. Which means we can end the session by leaving and beginning the next combat. On the ship, of course. Good. Time to leave the island.
Let's go.
Board the boat. Yes, please.
Tired but victorious, the party made for the Lady Vengeance. The horrors of Fort Joy behind them. They arrived as sorcerers. They left as God-woken. The fate of this God-forsaken world now rested on their shoulders. Or at least, on the shoulders of one of them.
So that was the theater interlude. This is where we're going to start the next video.